Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I have Agape Garcia here. She is the founder of Be Your Incredible Self, and she is a high performance coach, and she's been coaching since 2016. Agape's been through a lot, a lot. She's a survivor. She's here. She's thriving. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, so we were chit-chatting before we started recording, and let's start from the beginning because you were telling me your background is Puerto Rican, you grew up in Chicago, I grew up in New York, but your mom gave you up when you were a baby.
Wow, yes. Okay. So, my background, for the record, is not Puerto Rican. It's that's I'm adapted to my environment.
Oh, okay, she's okay. She's not actually Puerto Rican. But for those of you out there, when you grow up with a lot of Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, you kind of share a lot with them and understand the culture. So we admire the culture, right?
Oh my gosh, 100%. Yo puedo hablar y bailar y cocinar en español. A mí me encanta. Okay.
Hi, papi.
Yes. Ooh,
Oh,
we're gonna get in
mommy.
trouble. Epa, ten cuidado.
That's
We're
okay. I
gonna get
could
in
take it.
trouble.
I got some friends to back me up.
That's right. That's right. That's so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Um, so you want me to start with, you had mentioned my mother already. So okay, I guess we'll start there then.
If you would like to talk about that. If not, we can go somewhere else
No, I'm totally
with it.
fine with that. It's your
Okay.
show. I'm a guest. I'm gonna roll with it.
Okay.
Uh, so when I was 2, my mother left with another man. She left me and my baby sister. When she packed her stuff and decided to go, she left us behind. She left us behind in the same environment that she herself was not able to tolerate, and she left us there. Shortly after her leaving, my sister was diagnosed with cancer. After she was diagnosed with cancer, she passed away. So within a matter of 1 year, my father lost his wife, lost his baby girl, and then was stuck looking at me. So overnight, I inherited all the voids that a parent would typically shelter or protect their children from. And of course, at that young age, I had no idea what I was in for. And so I would say that the trauma began very young. And the way that I was able to cope had everything to do with the way that my dad was coping. Obviously, back then I had no idea what coping was or any of these things. It's, the knowledge that I have today. And I would say that my dad did the best that he could with what he knew and what he had. And he chose to work third shift and sleep during the day. So there was minimal interaction between him and I. He was pretty much checked out and living his life the best way he felt that he could or knew how. And that resulted in me being anywhere and everywhere and finding ways to do things other than be home. I would spend my grammar school life at the cemetery doing homework, bonding, with my deceased sister. That was the only place I felt like I had emotional connection. I was participating in every single after school program available. I was at any extracurricular program that was available at the rec hall in the neighborhood park. And by sixth, seventh, eighth grade, I was already mowing lawns, pulling weeds, washing cars, cleaning houses, watching little kids while moms took a shower or cooked food. And with that, I went to the store and purchased things that a little girl needs. And so there was a lot of rough areas during that point, that period of adolescence in my life. And I say that because I'm walking to school, I'm walking to the park, I'm walking home, I'm walking to the cemetery. I'm out in the streets as a little kid. And back then, there were crossing guards on corners. There were more people out in the street, and they were looking up. There wasn't cell phones. They could hear because there wasn't earbuds, if there were big headphones, if that.
Mhm.
And at any rate, as long as I was home by the time the street lights went on, I was okay, because I also had to wake up my dad so he could get to work on time, because that was also my time to get ready for bed and, prepare for school the next day. So there were so many days and nights I wake up crying just because it's so silent and lonely, that it's loud. And looking back, I realized that at such a young age, I was finding ways to cope. I was finding ways to fulfill my voids without even realizing what I was doing. I just stayed engaged. I stayed mentally stimulated. I already had a work ethic. I already knew the neighborhood. Like, I grew up so fast. And, during high school years, I had this attitude about, I know everything. I can work, I can feed myself, I know how to get around, I know everybody, in the neighborhood. There's nothing you can tell me. And that was quickly squashed, because number one, by that time the neighborhood was not as good anymore, and we moved quite often. So at this point, I was, what I would call the hood. And there were things to get into right outside the door on every corner if I wanted to. There was plenty of distractions.
Oh, yeah.
And I knew at such a young age that I did not want to be a part of those screams at night. I did not want to be a part of that gang banging that I saw out there. I just didn't want to be a part of all that. And I would have to say that probably stemmed from my childhood as well, because for the same reasons that my mother left were the same reason, those were the same similar environments that I was exposed to, if you know what I'm saying.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
I
yeah.
already had an understanding. Yeah. So I already had an
Yes.
understanding of what I was not going to be a part of. And so quickly, as a sophomore, I dropped out of high school. I had already met a guy at the park and thought that he was just the best thing ever, because he wasn't about the streets and neither was I. So, this is perfect, etc. And we dated for quite some time. I was in a teen violent relationship. This also stemmed from childhood, because, there was a lot of rough housing, and DCFS was called annually to my home. I was never taken away, but they were called to do their checks. And this was like, violence was the norm. It was at home, it was outside, it was everywhere. In high school, we had to walk through metal detectors to get in.
Mhm.
So this is nothing new. And I would have to say that specifically in my teenage years, that's where I was blessed with so many mothers. This is where the Puerto Rican moms, the Colombians, the Dominicans, this is where all my madres came into place, and there's it's such a loving culture, because when they find out, que tú no tienes madre, que tú no tienes padre, that you're just, andando por ahí en la calle, they want to bring you in. They're like, okay,
Yeah.
you know what? No, this is, you need to know what's up. Let me tell you what happens out here. And that's something that's very big in not just that culture, but also in the city, is that if you don't learn respect from your household, you're going to learn it real quick on the streets. Whatever you're not taught at home, you will be taught by the street. And that's a very true statement. Very true statement. And those women who brought me in, they hate it when I say, I appreciate that you brought in strays, say you're not a stray. And say, well, if you say so, anyways, we go back and forth to this day. I still have all of these beautiful mothers in my life. So that's one thing I totally would not change. Anyways, with this teenage violent relationship, when I got pregnant, I knew also that I was not going to be the mother that my mother was. I was not going to be the parent that my father was. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm in a similar situation. I don't want to repeat these patterns. Like, if this is the reason why my mother left, then, okay, I get it. I need to go too. The only thing I didn't get was like, why would you leave your kids? So I knew that's not what I was going to do. at any rate, while, during my pregnancy, there was still a lot of violence going on. And after I had my daughter, a few months later, actually, he decided to actually turn to the streets. And at that point, for me, it was a no-brainer. Things were already piling up over, the 4 or 5 years that we were together. And that was the icing that, was put on the cake. I said, absolutely not. I will not drive in a car worried that somebody saw you in this car and then I get shot or my baby gets shot. I am not going to put our lives in danger for you. Who does it, like, you're checked out. You're checked out. So that was almost an immediate understanding that I had as soon as I found out the news. And
Mhm.
believe it or not, his own mother came to help me pack and get out of the place. We had our own little apartment and everything. We were a cute little family, right? So I ended up going to a basement that had no heat. It was just brick walls and cement floor, but I made it a cute little studio. It had a bathroom at least. So, my daughter had her crib, I had my day bed, we had a little carpet, a microwave. Like, I made it a very comfortable, cute little clean space that it was peaceful. And obviously that did not stop his violence or his determination to, get what he wanted. However, I can say that he did get into enough trouble that he left the States and took off and never looked back. So I thought at that point the drama was gone. I was relieved. I can raise my daughter on my own. Anyways, I quickly went back to get my GED because I realized that this baby is 100% my responsibility. Nobody paid child support for me. I basically raised myself. My childhood was stripped. I was very mature at a very young age. And so, again, I just felt like I knew what I had to do in order to be responsible and provide and protect for my baby. So, went back to school. I started to move every year as well. Like when the lease came up, I was getting further and further outside of the neighborhood and just, changing jobs as well, just kind of going up the ladder, right? No real vision in mind, just knowing that I had to make enough to cover expenses because I was literally on my own and was not going to get help. So I will fast forward to my 20s and tell you that when I was, 25, 26, 27, I'm thinking I'm on top of the world. I'm out the hood. I have my daughter in school full time across the street. My job's around the corner. My support system is around the corner. I'm no longer mourning every day at the cemetery. I've accepted, what life is. I'm no longer upset with my mother. She did what she had to do. I'm happy that I'm the person that I am because of her. Same thing about my dad, like not even worried, just, forgiving and accepting because I had created my life. I was the epitome of you can create the life you want. And I was surely doing that. And then I met somebody. So while I'm now in college, working full time, taking care of my daughter, paying all my bills, got my stuff together, I meet this guy and thinking that, hey, he's got his stuff together too. Back then there was no Facebook and do your background checks and all that kind of stuff. I just knew that I met his family, his friends, his coworkers. Everything seemed to be fine. Nothing to really worry about. And so I ended up pregnant for the second time. And during my pregnancy, not only did I have chickenpox, but also the extension to move completely on the other side of the United States was offered because he had got a job offer. So the question was posed to me, did I want to go or not? And obviously, when you come from the hood, the success story is getting out of the hood. So I was
Mhm.
like, yeah, it didn't take long. However, we had to agree and come up with a plan where you go first and I'll fly out every now and then until we find a place, but we have time. And plus I have to finish my semester and plus I want to wait for, the right timing for my daughter and then, work and everything, packing, all that stuff. So I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm driving all the way across country, just my daughter and I. and takes 2.5 days to get there. And it took about 3 weeks for our items to arrive. I was solely focused during those 3 weeks, getting my daughter acclimated at her new school, getting familiar with the neighborhood, getting to know who my new doctors are, focusing on, the very near future that's right around the corner.
Mhm.
And when I'm unpacking my stuff in the best of mood, I come across belongings of another woman. I, s- I said, what? My eyes are out of my head. My heart is pounding through my chest. I can't even count how fast the beats are pumping. And I was tormented all day behind the thoughts of, what is this? Where is this? What were the conversations that we had? What was going on, et cetera, et cetera. And I decided to play the day out normally, pick up my daughter from school, make dinner, homework, the whole shebang. And then about 10:30 at night, when I knew she was sleeping, I said, we have something to talk about because I came across some things while I was unpacking today that I really am confused and need clarification around. And, he's like, okay. I said, well, I found remnants of another woman underneath the sink and I would like to know what's this about. He said, oh, you were going through my stuff? No, I was not going through your stuff. I said I was unpacking, getting settled, and I came across these things. Before I could even finish my sentence, I'm on the ground. He's sitting on my pregnant stomach, 8 months by now, I'm already. And he has his left hand around my throat with his right hand closed fist punching me over and over and over again. And I don't, I'm squirming. I'm trying to, I guess, wrestle or grapple. And then I hear this voice, Mom, Mom, a voice that I never heard. It was a scared little girl, and it was my scared little girl. And as soon as that registered in my brain, I got this huge hot rush of adrenaline that just swooped through my body. My feet slam on the floor. My hips are thrusted towards the ceiling. My neck is used as a kickstand. He rolls over the top of me. I pop up on my feet. I don't even know how. Run around the couch, grab my daughter's hand, and fly out the door like that, barefoot, almost middle of the night, boohooing, face swollen, crying. The first light that I see in the complex is where I go pounding on the door, begging to use their phone, which I did. And I can't not even explain how those, 20 minutes that I was waiting for the police felt like days of just crying and such disbelief, devastation, having no idea what life was or is. Like, is this even reality? I was full of doubts. I couldn't even think clearly. I had no idea what to expect, what to do, where to go. No friends, no family, no coworkers, like literally nothing. And so, the police ended up taking him. I had enough marks for, there to be evidence. And I took my daughter back home that night. We had an escape route. I made it like a game. If I say this, you do that. This is what you do. This is how you do it. And you go to that same door, knock as hard as you can, and ask again, to use the phone. And I will have to say that night is where my entire life shifted forever. I became a different woman, became a different mother, became a different person in the world. And that first night was full of no sleep whatsoever, extensive research on what to expect, what the laws were. I have no idea. I'm in this foreign place. Definite nonstop crying. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. Why? I don't understand. Begging for strength for what to do, where to go, how to even go about it. There's definitely a lot there. And I'll say it's 20 years later. And, me coming out for the first time this year to talk about my story and share not just my story, but share the growth that I've gone through throughout life, because trauma has been a part of my life probably since I was, in my mother's stomach, if I
Mhm.
understand her environment at the time. And so from understanding how to cope with such extreme trauma at a young age, but instinctively without being told or shown how or what or where to go, I was doing it instinctively as a child. And I'll say that when I became an adult and I thought I had got rid of all the violence and kept myself protected from all the violence, to find myself in that situation in my own home, I forgot what those instinctive things were. I was in survival mode. I was in protective mode. I was in 100% independence mode. I was mama bear. And, over the last 25 years, I've done nothing but make mistakes. I've done nothing but seek assistance mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, environmentally. Funds were not a part of, resources there that was available. Money was not an available resource for me to seek outside help, to seek counselors or coaches. Mental health wasn't even a thing 25 years ago. Emotional intelligence, emotional well-being, those things were just being discovered. As
Mhm.
a matter of fact, post-traumatic growth itself is pretty new. Everybody's familiar with PTSD. We all know how it affects us. We all know the long-term effects. And PTG is something that people are not familiar with. PTG, again, is post-traumatic growth, and it's something that anyone can experience. It's a positive psychological change that we experience after a traumatic event in our life. It's a form of personal growth through becoming stronger and wiser based on that experience, and what we're doing with that strength, what we're doing with that wisdom, how we're helping others or ourselves, because trauma affects us differently. It
Mhm.
impacts us differently. We respond to it differently. The one thing that brings us all together is how to cope better, how to control our thoughts, to convert to positive intelligence, to be more demanding and commanding in our inner critic, in our inner voice, in our walk, in our belief system. And it doesn't happen overnight. It takes commitment, it takes courage, it takes consciousness, it takes something that you truly desire because you love yourself.
Yes. I've never heard of post-traumatic growth. Is that what it stands for? PTG? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I want to go back to you growing up in the city, like in the hood, because I could relate to that because I grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan when it wasn't really a great neighborhood. Like if you go there now, ooh, this is really nice. Yeah, but in the 70s and 80s, not so much. And so you see a lot of stuff happening in the street. Like everything happened in the street, right? People would fight,
Everything.
they would make out, they would whatever. It all rolled out into the street eventually.
Block parties. Oh yeah, everything was there.
Yeah. And then, I grew up in a 20-story building. So the kids that were in the building, that's kind of who you hung out with, that and the people you went to school with, right? And drugs were really prevalent.
Right.
Remember, there were these two boys that lived in my building, and that one was really cute. But he got messed up in drugs. So it was always like, oh, he got messed up. It's too bad. It's too bad he got into that
Yeah.
stuff, you know. But as when you reflect back on what happened, especially with the father of your second child, were there any warning signs or red flags that you didn't pick up on, or?
And thank you for asking that, because I had a coworker that asked me the same thing before I left the state. And she said, make sure you get into an escalated argument with him, like blow it up. Make sure that you see his temper, just because you're leaving everything. Like, and this is what she's telling me. All my friends are at least 20 years older than me. It's like all my friends are my mothers. I love it.
Well,
And
and there's a
I
reason
did.
for
I felt,
that. There's a reason for that because
oh,
you didn't
yeah.
have a mother, so you were looking for mothers. Or if you don't have a good father or a good mother, Like, you tend to make friends who are good mothers and fathers because you need that. There's a hole there and you need that. So you go and seek it out.
It's interesting that you say that because I don't know if I was seeking it. I think two things. Either I was attracting it, so maybe now it's three things, or I was being blessed unknowingly. That's who was being sent in my path, or I
Mhm.
was just so damn mature for my age. I was like their age, just a younger number.
Well, there was probably something about you because we put out energy, right? And so there was an energy about you, and some of these moms probably picked up on it and said, well, she needs me. She needs some help, and I'm going to go help her. I'm going to help guide her. I'm going to feed her. Whatever I can give her, I'm going to give her. Like that whole concept, it takes a community to raise a child, you know. It's wonderful that they stepped in, you know. And it's also protection. I mean, I really feel like as children, we have a lot of protection. And I'm talking about angelic and that kind of stuff. We get protected as a kid. So,
I believe that as well, for
yeah, oh my
sure.
God,
Yeah.
I know for sure I was, for sure, for sure. So,
Yep. If we made it out unscathed,
the
yeah,
stuff I deal with
absolutely.
now, I did have to deal with as a kid. And I know like my angels were like, nope, you're not going to mess with her today. Nope, just stay away from her. They did an excellent job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So,
I would have to say that I followed those that great idea. I was like, you know what? Yeah, we've gotten into arguments, but you're right. I do need to see this. And and I did. We got into an argument. I definitely blew it out of proportion to the point where I like packed his stuff and dropped it off outside and all kinds of stuff. And there was no flags. There was no flags, nothing that, and believe me,
wow.
for me to give up every single thing that I had ever known in my life, I already made it out of the hood. My situation, my environment was like perfect. There's no way I would have jeopardized any of that if I even had an inkling of a sign that there was abuse or violence behind that man.
So, isn't it amazing? I mean, that's like Oscar level acting, that there are just people out there that act a certain way and they're like professionals at it. They have a mask and you can't see through the mask. But I feel like the more charming a person is, the more suspicious I am of them. Because that charming person that everybody loves, they try to appeal to your ego a lot of the time, which doesn't work for me and automatically makes me suspicious. Well, maybe it's because I'm from New York, I'm suspicious. But you're a city girl, you're kind of suspicious all the time, right? So those kind of charming people, I'm always like, there's something wrong with them. They're overcompensating for some kind of lack and they're trying to charm everybody. And I do not like those people at all. Was he charming or anything like that? Or he just appeared normal?
Yeah, because while you were saying that, I'm like, was it that way? And I don't feel, because I was not like all goo goo gaga and love, being showered with all these affirmations and that kind of stuff. I will say that, it just seemed he just seemed very average. It was normal, you know. The sad part, the very absolute sad part is, I did reach out to his mom and a couple of mutual people, friends that we both knew, almost, probably about a week after he, was arrested and stuff, and shared with them what happened. It was three people, three women, his mom and two family members. And all three of them knew that he had that violent streak. And I said, why didn't you say anything to me? Why in the world did you not tell me anything? I thought that and that's the thing too, is that you think you get along with somebody, you think you're cool with somebody, you think that there's like this womanhood that would talk to another woman to woman. I mean, long story short, I believe that they were also afraid,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore felt that if they would have said something because of who I am and how I am, I probably would have confronted. And confronted is not a negative thing. Confronting means you care enough to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably felt that, I would do that. And they didn't want to feel or be a part of those ramifications if that took
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
So really unfortunate. And then of course there was a huge part of me that was like, oh my gosh, he waited until I had nothing. He waited until I gave up everything. Going back to what you were saying, is like how people put on this persona, right? and
Yeah.
and that's where I went more so than, oh, what a sweet talker, and he was so charming and da, da, da. No, it was more like he was very calculating. It was almost like it was premeditated. It was like as if I was preyed upon, because maybe I looked like a challenge, or maybe I looked as if I was weak because I didn't have certain things in my life, or because I was, a very independent person. I don't know, but whatever those assumptions were, they were all wrong. Because I'm a fighter and I'm a mother. Don't go there, especially don't ever underestimate a
Mm-hmm.
woman,
Me
period.
too. Me too. I have those conversations with my best friend, and we're like, if we have daughters, so we both have daughters. We say if anybody threatens our daughter, the safety of our daughter, we feel sorry for them, because the first person I'm calling is my friend, and we're gonna be like, what's the plan?
Yep.
Yeah. Huge mama bears. Huge. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And what I will also share is some things about trauma.
Okay.
We stop trusting. We have this extreme independence. Everything has to be done through us, because I cannot rely or trust or give.
Right.
There's a lot of different human natural responses that we're not even considering. And as long as they're not harming you or the ones that you love, you're just going through the motions, is what I like to say, because there's no such thing as feeling guilty behind being natural. And so I would say that some of that is self-sabotaging. The trust that you lack after going through a traumatic experience in life is ultimately your ability to trust yourself, because you're second guessing yourself, you're doubting
Mm-hmm.
your decisions or your judgments, or you're not sure anymore. Like all of a sudden you not punked yourself, but you're just like, okay, I was wrong, and holy crap, how did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where I also go to really understanding that you only have the ability to control yourself. You really only have the capacity to control yourself. So while something is happening to you that's outside of your control, that's when you're a victim. That is when you're a victim. Once you realize that it was nothing you could have controlled, then you were victimized. As soon as you accept that, as soon as you acknowledge that you had no control over that situation, and that there was nothing else that you could do to change or prevent that, that is when you are starting your post-traumatic growth, because you're no longer seeing yourself or identifying yourself as a victim. You're now saying, I was victimized.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, when you realize, I'm not ever going back to that situation, I will never be in that situation again, because I do know how to prevent or mitigate or see it or smell it before it happens. Now you're on your way to personal growth. Now you're actually thinking about maybe not what you do want, but your absolutes, what you don't want, your absolute
Mm-hmm.
non-negotiables,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
that is the absolute beginning of your journey on in and on post-traumatic growth. And it's not easy when I don't want to say the dust settles, but it's not easy when your mindset and your emotional well-being are on the battlefield, when your mind and your heart are at war, because you really, really want and desire, but you're full of these, I call it a blanket of doubts that just wrap around you and keep you really warm inside. You know, it's hard to come out of that. And it just it keeps coming back to you, how you see yourself, how you trust yourself, how you're going about your day, how are you talking to yourself, how you're
Mm-hmm.
talking to yourself, are your affirmations good and or bad, and then how you're, how you are affirming by talking to yourself or about yourself to others, then that becomes a belief system. And what happens with your belief system? You walk in it, you respond to it, you have expectations within it, you're accusing people because of it, so it's really getting things back into alignment. And it's
Yeah.
not hard. We think we have to pick ourselves up off the floor, and we do have to pick ourselves off the floor, but we don't have to do it by on our own. You can reach out for that hand that's helping you up off the floor. It's just a tool. It's
Yeah.
just a tool. Same thing
Yeah.
as medicines or different things that we utilize to help us get through whatever it is that we're getting through. You don't have to do it all on your own. There is help out there, and it's nothing to be ashamed about. It's really not. There's so many people that are ashamed of their story, of their traumatic event, of their domestic violence, of their pain, of their suffering, when trusting other people with their heart, with their emotions, and what they end up going through, as a result of it, when it doesn't pan out in their favor. And it's nothing to be ashamed about. We're not taught narcissism in school. We're not taught how to identify financial abuse or physical abuse or verbal. There's a lot of things we're not taught along the
Yeah.
way, you
Here's a
know?
term that didn't really exist or was known about or used about 20, 25 years ago. Gaslighting.
Mhm.
We're very familiar with that now, but there wasn't really a word for that. Weren't really
That's right.
aware of it, right? So
That's right.
how do you move on from being totally blindsided by this guy? How do you trust yourself again? How do you learn to trust that you have the right instincts?
Right. So, like I had shared in the earlier on, I did lose a lot of that instinctive response or outlook that I had as an innocent child. And I can't explain how I lost it. Maybe it was just because I was older and I knew more. So I was more confused instead of clear. Um, but I did a lot of self-help. I didn't have finances to pay to go talk to anybody. What I
Mhm.
did was I went to the library to get workbooks. I worked through like abandonment issues. I worked through trying to figure out how to not stay sad all the time and question everything that you're doing, but how to really get that, how to talk to yourself. And I can't say that I really went to the library to get those types of books. That came from those mothers in the hood when I was growing up, because there's a lot that you go through, a lot that you see, a lot that you need to defend and deflect and be aware of when you walk outside, when you're walking those streets. And
Mhm.
if you do not have situational awareness, if you are not instinctively feeling what is danger, where not to go, if you're
Mhm.
not listening to that, that is where we get derailed. And for me personally, I would have to say that that's what was happening to me. I wasn't listening to myself, even though I was there, talking to myself the right things, right? I just wasn't listening. I was ignoring. So what ended up happening for the first 10 years was just absolute no nonsense. It was a schedule. It was about the clock. It was what had to be done. Everything was like to the minute, to the hour, to the day, to the week, to the month. Like there was no room for anything outside of the structure that I had, because I'm laser focused on, providing, protecting, feeding, taking care of. I never went back. I never went back to anywhere that, not where I originally came from in Chicago, and not where we have moved, when we first left. I am somewhere completely different, started from scratch, and all that I was laser focused on was making sure that my little teeny tiny unit of a family was taken care of. So it wasn't until I needed to have surgery on all areas that were used to fight for our lives that night. It was about 5 years worth of surgeries that I had, because I had to wait 6 months after each surgery. All those body parts needed to be repaired. And there I was in disbelief on how I'm still paying physically, financially, mentally, emotionally for some stuff that happened 10 years ago, and it's still
Mhm.
very much so prevalent in my life. And my kids are watching this go down. When I say watching this, me, going through these medical issues and stuff. And that was a big pivot time in my life, because when you're on your back and you are not able to go to work, and your larger world starts to get smaller and smaller, um you're stuck with your thoughts and how to navigate through them. And I just said that there had to be better. I didn't want to continue raising my kids that way. I wanted to give them a childhood where they felt like there could be freedom, like there could be autonomy, like there could be things that are sporadic, and and I felt like I was doing that. I felt like I had shifted and started doing that, and living by that. And then by the time my daughter was in her 20s, getting ready to leave the house, she said, "Mom, I really, respect and appreciate the mom that you've been all my life. You were pretty much a helicopter mom, even when I didn't like it. You still stayed that helicopter mom, and there were, rough points in my teenage years." She said, "And as close as you were, and as much as I was always able to reach out and grab you," she said, "emotionally, you were unavailable. I didn't Do you even have emotions? Like, you're emotionless. You're the only person that I know who's emotionless." And I'm like, "What? Are you kidding me? Do you not know, like, everything that I've done to make sure that I, was checked in and never checked out, and always here and always around, and you didn't have to worry about how you were going to eat or where you were going to sleep or if the heat was going to be on, or like blah 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 blah." And I said, "Oh my gosh." I cried all night. I had to validate her feelings. I had to really think about what she was saying. I had to really look into myself, and I had to accept that she was right. Not just that she's entitled to her feelings, but that she was right about me, that I didn't have ever a bond with any parent to know what I was like missing, or yeah, I didn't know. You can't miss something you never had. So I didn't know what it was to even
Mhm.
give it. I just knew that I wasn't going to leave her. I knew that I wasn't going to abandon her. I knew that I wasn't going to, inflict all these things that, I dealt with. And so I started looking into it, and I found, the book of the five love languages, and I made her do that with me. I made her take the quiz, and so I could learn about her and her about me. And, I my laser focus shifted to fixing this, and not just for her and I, but also, for my other child and for the future of us, period.
Mhm.
And, I started understanding emotional awareness, emotional intelligence. I started understanding mind and body connection. I really dug deep into all this stuff. And I will tell you that when I started applying it and following through with it and reaching out with it, she thought I was being sarcastic. She thought I was joking. She took it so many times the wrong way that I had to tell her, "Listen, girl, you either want what you're asking for, and you accept that this is not sarcasm, that this is like a real effort to become a real thing, or you push me away and don't get it. Because regardless, I am going to become this person for myself, even though, I started because I wanted to fix this with you, I quickly realized that this is also for me. And I love you for being honest and vulnerable and sharing with me, a huge void that was a part of me wanting to protect. I thought I was protecting your heart. I didn't never knew I was the one inflicting, such pain in there. And I feel horrible behind that. Like my whole life has been around protecting and providing. So it's close to 10 years later now, and we have a great relationship. She's mentally and emotionally healthy. Our relationship is healthy. Like I said, I have both of my kids' blessings to do this, otherwise I wouldn't be. And it's a huge part of the post traumatic growth, because if we were able to go 20 some years and I was that consistent person, and within a matter of 5 years, that consistency of shifting who I was into who I wanted to become, to have the relationship I have now. I mean, that's what makes the journey worth it, right?
Yeah, totally. So you're a coach now. So tell us a little bit about what you do and who you work with, and how people can find you or contact
Oh,
you.
okay, thank you. So, Be Your Incredible Self is my brand, and it's all spelled correctly. It's beyouриncredibleself.com, Be Your Incredible Self on Facebook, Instagram. And the funny part about Be Your Incredible Self is actually everybody knows about the Incredible Hulk. Not many people are familiar with the Incredible She-Hulk. She's been around since the 80s. She's stronger, she's smarter. They are the superheroes that have superhuman powers. They are triggered by their emotions. They retreat to avoid becoming a monster and responding. Their environment is what sets them off. I mean, it's like, holy cow. I never even correlated the two until a couple years ago, started reading about it and was like, what a genius. And the adrenaline that I talk about that night, that I fought for
Hmm.
our lives, that's women have picked up cars off of children because of that adrenaline. Like
Hmm.
facts, like Google fact it or fact check or whatever it's called. We can do that. It's within us.
Hmm.
And so that's a part of the inner strength that I really like to focus on as well in my programs. And so I've been a life coach for quite some time, over 5 years now. I never really intended on, starting a practice or coaching people. I'm just a friend and a person that cares. I've coached all my life without even knowing it was a real thing. And I actually pursued the studies and certification for the coaching because I needed to help myself. That's how it started.
Hmm.
Um, and then, of course, I had a whole bunch of beta, clients, because that's a part of graduating and whatnot. And we all stayed friends. We all beta coached each other still, and come back with different, tools and techniques that work and whatnot. So that is my whole life coaching approach. That's kind of where I started. But my foundation, what I really work on, is my certified high performance coach through Brendan Burchard. I graduated through his high performance academy about a year ago. And that is the foundation for all of my coaching, because his coaching is scientifically backed. He has done so many absolute wonderful, great things for people, for high performers, for high athletes. I mean, for top end people. And for him to have an abundance of information and the 12 pillars that are absolute pillars of our life, of the foundation that makes us tick, happy, clear. Um, to me, again, that's what I use as my foundation. And then what I really emphasize on is that emotional awareness, that emotional intelligence, that positive thinking, in order to control your triggers, and the wisdom that I have from being boots on the ground of 30 some years full of trauma, and how to apply the tools that actually work to have and live through post traumatic growth. I help people of all kinds that are looking to seek clarity, have control over their triggers, and build the relationships that they truly desire.
So how do you control your trigger?
I do have my own Be Your Incredible Self formula, and that is taking your situational awareness and combining that with your emotional intelligence so that in the moment you are triggered, you have your absolute power in that moment, right then and there, to respond or react. And that is a class all in itself, understanding situational awareness, understanding where your emotions live in your body when you are triggered, and that moment that you are empowered to meet your intended outcome by
So
controlling your triggers.
is the goal to respond in a calm way, or could it be not to respond?
Well, and that's where your emotional intelligence comes in, right? Because it's
Yeah.
based on the situation that you're in. It's
Mhm.
based on what the outcome is that you're seeking and what is best for you at the moment. Not anybody else, you. What's best for you at the moment? If
Mhm.
you react, you're not thinking, it's just knee jerk reacting. When you're responding, usually there's some more thought to it, but you know yourself better than anybody. If you feel like you need a little bit more time to marinate on how you want to respond, then take it. It's your liberty. That's your life. It's your choice. You have control over
Mhm.
you. Just because somebody's pressuring you or wants to take your power or wants you to be triggered and react, don't give them that. That's
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
You own it.
Yeah. So true. Well, thank you, Agape, for being on the show. For the listeners, all her information is going to be in the notes if you want to reach out to her. And thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. And I hope that your listeners believe that there is always a brighter light and that you can always level up. The biggest price you'll ever pay is neglecting your mindset. So don't do it.
Good advice.